Okay, so girls, we had left off today talking about Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a Frenchman who came to the United States and traveled all over. And the big thing he wrote was on democracy. He wanted to see what was going on with the United States post-revolution, with people actually voting and being part of a democracy. And what he observed to him was wonderful that people were so involved in politics and so many people were voting, and that in fact we do have a culture and a democracy all our own. And he made all these observations all over and wrote about it. And what it does is why it's important to us is it shows us that we have a unique identity. And we talk about one of the thematic learning objectives is American national identity is starting to emerge, and it's really starting to emerge in this time period. And we did talk about the dictionary and American authors and things like that. So just make sure you understand that this handsome fella here that you're looking at is Alexis de Tocqueville, and that was his contribution. He was a Frenchman, and just pointing out that Americans did have this unique democracy and this unique culture. Okay. That's what we need to know about that. So, one thing that Andrew Jackson inherited from John Quincy Adams was the problem with the tariffs. And remember, we talked that a protective tariff is something that helps American manufacturers because it makes imported goods more expensive to the end user, and folks tend to buy what is less expensive. And in those cases, then it would be American manufactured products. So where this became a problem was in the South. Slowly after, remember, part of the American system was a plan for a protective tariff, and there was a tariff in 1816. And since 1816, the tariffs have gone up and up and up. And where they're really a problem is in the South, because the people in the South are not manufacturers. They are part of an agrarian economy, right? Everything that they grow is shipped out as raw goods, and that's their economy, using slave labor. So they don't manufacture things down there. So everything that they buy is, they got very accustomed to buying imported goods from Britain and other places. And sure, they can get American manufactured goods down there, but they're being shipped down there. I'm not saying there's an import tax on them, but sometimes it's more expensive for them down there because it has to travel to them, and it's not as easy as it is in the north where the manufacturing plants and the factories are. So things are already a little bit more expensive down there for them, and then you have these imported goods with huge tariffs on them. And then also what ends up happening is that in Europe, they start putting taxes on imported goods there. So then you have a situation where Europeans retaliate and they don't want to buy American goods over there either. So you have people who don't want to buy anything here, people who don't want to buy anything there. So what this point here, where it says invited retaliatory tariffs on American agriculture products, that hurt the South. That means, what we mean by that is that in European countries, they're going to put taxes on tobacco and cotton and things like that that the Southerners are shipping over there. So that's also going to hurt them. So the tariff to them becomes a tariff of abominations. It becomes something that they abominate or hate, and it's going to become a major problem. Um, so we're going to see different camps on this, where people are in different groups, and really this brings up that scary word sectionalism again. You have post War of 1812, lots of nationalism, the American system, great, tariffs, great, but after a while the tariffs get to be so high they become a problem, and they become another situation for sectionalism to rear its ugly head, because in the South they're going to really complain, and in the North the tariff is good for them. It's protecting their manufacturing. Okay, so that's the deal. So by 1828, the tariffs are really high. That the tariff of 1828 was really high. So they slowly get higher and higher, and now Jackson becomes president, and it becomes his problem. Okay, they call it the Yankee tariff, things like that, because it's protecting the Northerners or Yankees. Okay, middle states, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, the middle states and the New England states are benefiting from the tariff. Everybody else seems to be suffering from it. And complaining about it. So in South Carolina, it becomes a major issue. South Carolina is called the Palmetto State. You'll see this picture in your book, and this flower here is actually like a kind of a paper mache type version of what what a palmetto flower looks like. This lady has it here. There's one here. So it became their signature thing. The people who were looking for nullification, they wanted to nullify or render null and void or invalid or make it that it's not there. To nullify something, you get rid of it. Say it's not there, it's null, it's zero, it's nothing. They wanted to nullify the tariff in the state of South Carolina, and to support that, this was their little symbol of support for the state of South Carolina. It becomes such an issue that, in fact, they want to secede from the union. It becomes such a big problem. Does this? Oh, sorry, girls, just testing my tools here. Okay, so all right, and here's the other thing too. Always, always, always the issue of slavery is going to sneak back in here with the sectionalism. When they start worrying about tariffs and the economy in the South, there's always this anxiety and this fear that the federal government's going to do something that's going to mess with slavery. And we know slavery in the South is part of their economy, it's part of their culture. So they're very concerned that maybe that's going to be the next thing. You know, if they're putting this tariff and they're doing that, what's going to happen next? Is there something that's going to happen with slavery? And also, too, this is around the time in 1822 it was that Denmark Vesey, who was actually a free black, actually led a revolt of slaves, and it was an uprising that was quelled, and he actually, Denmark Vesey, ends up getting hanged, and they kind of make an example of him. But the fact that this actually occurred in the South put a little bit of fear into the Southerners, and it was something that was talked about, and the Northerners are questioning, you know, this institution, this peculiar institution, if should we be even allow this to go on? You know, people are rebelling. This is a concern. So all of these things bring, again, the sectionalism and slavery to a head, and slavery is always brewing in the back of sectionalism. And eventually it's going to come to the forefront, of course, when we get to the reasons that lead to the Civil War. Okay, so again, the abolitionists, the people in the South are afraid that the abolitionists are going to use the central government power to do other things to stop slavery or do something like that. So that's a concern as well. John C. Calhoun is going to come on the scene. He originally starts off as in his political career very strong for central government, but as time goes on, he becomes more of a states' right activist. He is from the South. He is from South Carolina, and the nullification crisis is going to be something that he's going to champion. He is for nullification. He does not feel that the tariff is fair at all, and actually moves to have South Carolina, talks about South Carolina seceding from the Union. He actually writes the South Carolina Exposition that we mentioned right here, and it was supposed to be a secret, but it was actually written by him. So he denounces the tariff and talks about the fact that it is unconstitutional. He felt that the tariff, there was nothing in the Constitution that claimed that this was a constitutional act, according to him. So he wants the state to order it null and void. Okay, so what he wants to do is not pay it. They're going to push to ignore it in the state of South Carolina, and that's John C. Calhoun. Okay, so they tried to get a 2/3 vote to nullify this. But of course, the unionists or the people for a strong central government are going to not let that happen. And a different tariff is going to pass in 1832. We're going to talk about our friend again, Henry Clay, who comes in with an idea for a compromise again. Okay, but that's not before South Carolina threatens to secede from the Union, and there's many debates over this in Congress. Okay. Okay, so this is what we talked about before. So if Washington, so of course, Andrew Jackson is not going to take this lightly, and it talks about actually sending the federal military into South Carolina to force them to pay the tariff. And people are like, whoa, that's really using way too much executive power. And that's one thing about Andrew Jackson we want to mention, actually. Make sure you guys understand that one of the things that his enemies or his people who were against him, his adversaries would say about him, is that he definitely usurps too much power. They say executive usurpation. He definitely is one to push the limits. He's going to question the other two branches of government and what they do, and sometimes try and override it. This force bill we're going to talk about in a second right here is an example of Andrew Jackson really utilizing a lot of power. He does, Congress passes it, but it is something that Jackson really pushes for, in that he wants to be able to use military force on the state of South Carolina if they don't pay that tariff. Okay, and Jackson himself, he's not totally against the tariff, but what makes him angry is that he kind of wants control over it, and he doesn't think that, he's kind of someone who would be for the South, for South Carolina, but he kind of wants to be in control of the situation. And one group is going to have to surrender. This could have been a start of a civil war here if he sent that militia in. So somebody's going to have to concede, and Andrew Jackson, that's not really his strong suit. So who is going to come forward? Of course, the great pacificator, the great compromiser. When you think of Henry Clay, girls, you think of a baby's pacifier, because that's what he does. He is always pacifying people. So the nation at the moment is a big crying baby. They have this issue, especially the state of South Carolina. So he's going to put a pacifier in their mouth and say, stop crying. So how does he do that? They come up with a compromise tariff of 1833, and basically what that does is it pushes, it comes up with a plan to slowly reduce the tariff. It's a period of about, sorry, I'm just looking for that. I guess it's not on here, but it's a period of about uh, 8 years that they're going to reduce the tariff by 10%. So it's a slow, gradual reduction, but it's a plan and it will go down. And actually, when it gets to the end of the 8 years and it's down by the full 10%, it's actually going to take it back to the level it had been before they started increasing the tariffs at a crazy rate. Okay, so the force bill is an example of Andrew Jackson using some pretty heavy executive powers there. Okay, even though Congress passes it, he doesn't veto it or anything like that. Okay. Um, Okay, so they actually repeal the nullification, but then the force bill itself actually ends up getting nullified too at some point. And Clay, again, it's really about compromise and pacifying the people, coming up with a plan that in essence really just shuts everybody up. Yeah, everybody's screaming about this thing or that thing, and Clay says, okay, let's do this, and it seems to satisfy both sides enough to not have a civil war at that point in time. Okay, so it wasn't really a clear-cut victory, as this says here, for any side. However, it was not a major crisis in the end. It was eventually worked out. Okay. Um, Oh, all right. So the Trail of Tears. We know the story. You guys learned about this last year in Colonial, and basically we talked about Jackson had a stronger stance with the Native Americans than did John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams wanted to sort of negotiate and talk with them and see how he could get them to work, buy their land or have them move out of the way or do whatever. Jackson kind of just he does it though. Make sure you know he kind of does it under he wants to protect the Native Americans from white settlers who are encroaching westward. He feels it would be safer for the Native Americans if he forcibly, it's safer if I forcibly move you. That sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of what he thought. It's safer if the military guides them along the way westward across the Mississippi than for whites to push them out of the way themselves. It could be horrendous for them, he says. So that's what he says. We know the Trail of Tears is horrible, and the Indian Removal Act of 1830 displaces over 100,000 Native Americans. So it wasn't pleasant for them, but that's the way he said it. And I think we said this in class today, that most people, the common man that Jackson is famous for representing, they shared the views that Jackson had. They shared this view that they just wanted the Native Americans out of the way. They didn't really care how, but they just wanted them out of the way. And the way he got people to agree to it was by saying that's why he wanted to do it. But we know it was sort of a brutal walk and a brutal trail for the Native Americans. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I can only record 15 minutes at once, so we'll pick up the rest of the slides in another one. We might have to do a couple of recordings, and then wrap it up. But so I'm just going to stop here because that's almost 15 minutes and we'll go from here. Thanks for listening.